No matter what business you're in, the idea of data mining or using data to plan, measure, analyze, and ultimately drive real performance for your business. If it's not getting measured, it's not getting done. It boils down to that. And I can't think of two better experts, and I'm going to let them tell you more about themselves. We're not going to spend a lot of time on introduction. That's what the app and the program is for. We want to get the information that you need to apply to your businesses. And as I said on social media before I came down here and on the Breakfast Club earlier this week, we will try to be entertaining, but you're not here to be entertained. You're here to be educated. So you should be taking notes. You should be capturing this information. You're not going to memorize everything you hear. There will be a brief, and I say brief Q&A period because we are running a little behind and we want to stay on schedule for lunch. So that means Q&A, not business plan and A, not what happened was an A. We want to get as many questions and answers as possible because if you have a question, it may be your question, but there may be 30 other people in the room that need to answer. So are we good? I will cut you off. I'm your moderator, not your host. What we have, I'm going to let them tell you a little about themselves and their businesses. But to my far right, we have A. Charles Thomas. Please give him a round of applause. And to my immediate right, we have Deshaun Barnes. Yes. And I already know from our conference call before we got down here, you are going to learn today. You're going to learn. Or at least I know they're going to teach. So we want you to learn. This is really critical. You can't do business in the 21st century and beyond without understanding and using and managing data as a resource. So with that, let's start with Charles Thomas.
Hello, everyone. I'm actually astonished this many people want to hear about data. So
I'm happy
that's fantastic. I'm the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at General Motors. I'm in charge of all data and analytics globally. I had the same role at Wells Fargo before that, and the same role at USAA. And 20 years doing data and analytics, helping companies use their information to drive value across the value chain within their customer base, with employees, within financials, within operations, and the like.
Hi guys, I'm Deshaun Barnes. I run a company called Osiris3 out of New York City. We focus on digital transformation and oversight. And a lot of what we do is we utilize data and analytics and data science to make sure a lot of companies, their PR companies are doing what they're supposed to do from a data perspective, and how PR translates to social media, and how social media translates into impressions on the website, and optimizing those users' journeys to make sure that holistically as a company, multiple vendors are technically doing what they're supposed to do from a data perspective.
So let's start out with this idea of how we think about data. Charles, we talked earlier about the need to develop a mindset for measuring, that things have to be measured. And we're not just talking about, oh, this is a tech thing and let the tech people crunch these things out. That the idea of having a mindset for measuring is critical to leverage data mining as an entrepreneur or as a professional in general.
Right, absolutely. So by show of hands, how many of you think all of your customers are equal?
Are all your customers equal?
If you were to track your time in terms of how you spend your time against your customers, would it say that they're equal? Well, that's good. My dad's an entrepreneur, and he was spending lots of time supporting customers and thinking he was doing a great job. Everybody loved him. Everybody loved the product, the service, what have you. But he was realizing that he was losing money. And you have to ask yourself, well, how did that happen? Well, it's because he was spending all of his time on the complaining customers and wasn't spending his time on the customers who are the most valuable. And you should discriminate. I know you can't say that in this room, but you should discriminate in business and reward those customers who in turn reward you with more business. If you're spending equal time with all of your customers, you're wasting your time. And so that's not analytics. It seems like common sense, but unless you actually track it, and what we found is when he asked me, hey, take a look at this for me. I'm like, look at how much time you're spending on the people who pay you the least. And they're complaining the most, and you're redoing stuff over and over and over again, and they're not bringing you any value. And even if they were, if you actually paid yourself what you're worth, you'd be actually paying them to take your business. And so, just having a measurement framework and a mindset that says, I'm going to track things. I'm going to look at, for example, when's the last time a customer came in? And they typically come in every week, but they haven't come in for 2 weeks. What do I do? If you don't track that, you won't even notice it. And your business will erode slowly, and you won't even recognize it until you're now in a pinch. So I just think if you were to start thinking about, many people think about, well, I got to have a PhD and I got to have lots of tools and lots of data. It's just having the mindset that I'm going to measure and track things, and then I'm going to spend my time and money in the places where I have the greatest return.
A great example of that for Black Enterprise, as the media industry was changing, we had been a single magazine-driven company for the first 35 years of our business. So we paid attention to all of our advertisers in the magazine like they were all equal. A critical seminal changing point for the company was measuring our top 25 advertisers and realizing that they all spent money on digital and events. And if we created more events and we built our digital to appeal to those advertisers, we make a lot more money than the other 175 people on the list who may have been buying pages here or there, but they were never going to do more than that. And I believe we would have been out of business if we hadn't measured those things and said, no, all of our customers are not equal. Let's make sure that the ones that are spending the most money are getting what they want, and let's create more of what they want to get those customers. Deshaun, you talk about the importance of not building your house on rented land, and talk about what that means to an entrepreneurial group in terms of how they capture data and measure data and use it.
Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is your social media followers do not mean customers. And I think we all kind of are starting to get the idea that that's not the case. But what starts to happen is you have a lot of entrepreneurs trying to build this vanity number on platforms that you don't own, with audiences that you don't own. So just because your Instagram, your Facebook, Twitter, etc. have millions of followers, tomorrow they could be gone. And tomorrow you don't have the first place to kind of reach out to your customers. So the idea of building your house on rented land is basically saying, I'm going to build a strong foundation on social media. I'm going to post every single day. I'm going to, make sure I, do these blog posts over here or this and the other, make sure I promote on social media. You're promoting to an audience that you don't own. You're promoting to a house that you don't own. At the end of the day, a lot of my clients really focus on measuring how many people translate and move from social media to giving us email and contact information. They are more valuable. Then you're discriminating. You have to say, okay, they gave me their email, they gave me their phone number. They're more valuable than a random social media follower who I don't even know if sees my posts every single day. So the idea of building your house on rented land from a data perspective is making sure that you can measure your user journey and identify who those users are and what kind of service they're giving you as a company for, participating in your brand and your engagement on the property that you actually own. So,
a good friend of mine, Lamar Tyler, who has Traffic, Sales, and Profit, says the point of social media is to go there and then invite them to your house.
Exactly.
So it's to give them a reason to give you an email address or offer something that will make them leave Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and come to your house. Yeah. And then after that, it's your house and your audience.
Yeah, your house, your audience, and you at that point you're measuring the valuable customers, and you're not measuring users who could, be 50% of them could be fake. You have no idea. So you want to measure those users who value your company, your brand, your product enough to say, hey, reach out to me, sell to me more, I like what you're doing. Even if they don't buy initially, the fact that they're giving you direct contact information is extremely important, which is why you always see those ads, give us an email, because now you're actually within the funnel and being a lot more valuable than other customers.
So Charles, the truth is you can measure any and everything. And so there's one extreme which you don't measure anything and you just kind of feel your way along. But then there's the other extreme where you're measuring everything as opposed to trying to figure out what's the most meaningful thing that translates, to simplify, a piece of data to actual revenues. Talk about that. I mean, because GM has the tools and the muscle to measure everything under the sun.
Right. The key is to, many people say, well, let's go to the data and see what the data will tell me. That's actually the wrong approach. You have to have a strategy, right? And then the strategy has certain underpinnings or levers that actually will move the strategy. So every one of you, regardless of what business you're in, you have to acquire customers, you have to nurture and deepen them or cross-sell, and then you've got to retain them, and you want to grow them. And then heaven forbid you lose them, you have to win them back. Every single business has those challenges. Now, the question is, what are the levers at each one of those points, and are you tracking those levers? Okay, so on the front end, you know what, I'm using this many dollars for marketing or advertising. Is it working? How do you know it's working? One of the things I hate the most is when you're driving and you see, it says, does billboards work? It just did. No, it didn't. I just looked at it, right? I mean, it's like it works if I pick up the phone and I buy something, right? And, so, don't get enamored with clicks and don't get enamored with followers or likes. If they're not paying the bills, then you've got to really skew your resources towards the things that really do work, right? So along that entire value chain, once you acquire them, how do you onboard them? How do you make sure that it's a good onboarding experience? Now, how do you start to give them new products and services to consider? And then what are your take rates on those? What are the channels that you use? And then, so all the way through, you have to think about each one of the levers. And then now, how do you, what we call operationalize it? How do you translate that into a number that you can now track and measure? And then, how do you now focus all of your time on the things that work the most and spend as little of your time or give bare minimum service to the things that don't give the highest return. So it's really all about understanding your levers all the way through the business. It's not about just going to this magic 8 ball and finding the answer to your problem. You know what you know at least where to look. The question is, do you have the information you need in order to make the decision you need to make?
Both of you talk to me about the tendency, and I'm sticking with this idea that you have to know what to measure and you have to focus your time on that. How critical is it that this is not something, especially the critical stuff, is not something you kind of just delegate down the line? I mean, my tech guy will take care of it, my marketing guy will take care of it. How important is it for you as the owner of the company, even if someone else manages it on a day-to-day operation, are paying attention to these key measurables?
Yeah. At the end of the day, like Mark Cuban said yesterday, I don't know if you guys saw the panel, you need to be able to sell your business. You also need to be able to measure your business, because at the end of the day, what winds up happening is if you're a business owner, you need to be able to at least know what SEO stands for, what SEM stands for. If you know these things and you know just enough to be dangerous, you'll know if you're spending too much on it or not enough. If the needle's moving, at least you can kind of go to your analytics platform. Even if you're not an analytics expert, you see your traffic is up. If you can at least track back to the sources, you can now say, okay, let's spend a little bit more money on this platform. So as far as being able to optimize and know where you need to spend your money, it's about knowing just enough to be dangerous and just enough to know that, hey, I'm not going to hire this work out because now I'm not only spending money on marketing, I'm spending on money, the service for the marketing. So now you're actually losing even more money if you have no understanding of it at all. So at least know just enough so that you can actually optimize how you're spending, whether it be on certain platforms or certain strategies.
I'll be even more provocative. I mean, if you don't understand the numbers behind your business, then you don't understand your business at all. Yeah. Now, you might be a craftsman or a craftswoman and whatever it might be, but that's not the business. That's the product or the service. The business is the entity that is supposed to be enduring, and ultimately you want it to endure beyond your existence on this earth. And so the question is, how do you actually decompose the business into the measures that you need to know so that okay, when sales are down, here's what I need to go look for, right? Or when I'm starting to have customer attrition, what are the types of things that tend to drive those things? Or you know what, it seems to me like we're spending a lot of money on advertising, but they're falling out of the funnel somewhere. Where are they falling out, and how do I address that? If you're not really thinking about it from that perspective, then you're just kind of going about daily and kind of rolling the dice and hoping to get lucky. And that's really no way to run a business, particularly when there are tools that you can use to actually diagnose your business and focus your time on those things that matter the most.
Yeah, the other thing, and I want to get to this case study I know that we talked about doing, and I know there's a graphic that we want to show. I'm very, whenever you guys are ready, but I don't want to run out of time.
Yeah, it's very basic.
Okay, but the other thing about using the data and you as the CEO or the owner of the company understanding it enough, to be dangerous, is you can't BS a BSer. In other words, when you this is a space that if you don't know it, somebody can make you think they know what they're doing, and you'll say, hey, they said SEM, SEO, all sounds right to me, go ahead. And you'll pay them a lot of money to ruin your business. You have to know enough to even be able to measure the performance of the people, whether they're employees or outside vendors, who you hire to execute the plan. So this is not a space where you can kind of say, I'm gonna get somebody good and hope they're doing it right. You won't be able to tell whether they actually know what they're doing. Yeah. So what would you say should be the priority, if you will, and I'd like this from each of you. Consider we're gonna be talking for 40 minutes. You're not gonna learn everything you need to know. We're trying to give you enough seeds so you can go out and take action to do what you need to do. But what are maybe the top 2 from each of you things, priorities, actions that this audience should take once they leave this conference, wherever they are in this space, to ensure that they're really on track with this use of data?
I would say wherever you are promoting your business, you need to be measuring your business where you're promoting. If you're promoting somewhere and you can't measure, you should consider reevaluating that tool or that promotional avenue. Measure every dime you're spending if you can. I know sometimes it's very difficult to, if you're doing billboards, it's kind of difficult to say somebody gave you a call. You don't really, unless you ask them, you don't know if they give you a call because of the billboard. But my piece of advice is that if you're promoting your business in any way or using certain platforms, make sure you can at least measure the basics of that platform.
And just to add to that, I have a friend in the billboard business. He says you may not be able to measure whether they looked at the billboard and called, but if you put a billboard in a certain area, and there's a certain people who go to that area every day, there are ways to say, oh, we got more orders or more clicks from a person in this particular area since we put the billboard there. So there's intuitive data that may not give you a straight point A to B result, but you can still tell something different happened. Now we can measure it. Yeah. Charles?
Yeah, I mean, so businesses are all about revenue and costs, right? So it's kind of like the old adage about the person who goes to Vegas and says, hey, I won $2,000. Oh, really? How much did you lose? Well, $10,000, right? I mean, it's really about understanding the sources of it. So who is your customer? What motivates them to buy your product? Where do they come from to buy your product? Are they referring your product? So sources of revenue, where does it come from? Are they paying enough for the product? I think that's another thing that entrepreneurs don't really do, is that they say, well, I guess it costs this much, so I'll charge that, or that's what my competitors, maybe they're willing to pay more if you were to, add something to it, or if you were to enhance the features, or you were to communicate the benefits better. So really understand, you're leaving money on the table by not understanding these things. So what are your sources of revenue? And unfortunately, businesses spend too much time focused on top-line revenue and not really looking at waste in the system, right? So what are your costs, right? And your costs can be hard or soft costs. Most entrepreneurs don't consider their time a cost. But guess what? If you're spending your time and you're throwing a lot of your energy into things that, someone with a high school diploma could do, and you could pay them minimum wage and that would free you up to get to higher order issues.
Like sales?
Like sales. Like sales and marketing, promotions, and getting out and shaking hands and kissing babies. I mean, too many times people don't really look at the hard and the soft costs. And as a result, their business is leaking and they don't even know it. And they're so focused on the top line revenue that their profits at the end of the day aren't where they should be or could be.
I think I just want to add one more thing to that.
Sure.
And
by the way, both of you jump in whenever you're ready. Okay.
And we're not just talking about web, digital, social media here. Like Charles said before, somebody's walking in the store. If your peak days are Thursdays, they're not on Monday. This is measurement down to the dime. You realize you're spending $2,000 every quarter on pens. You have to measure every aspect of your business. That's where the data analytics and measurement kind of really come in, is measuring all these different vector points of your business.
And it doesn't always give you the answer, but it tells you what to test. So let's say you notice that on Thursdays, that's your big day, but you don't really understand why. That's your chance to say, okay, is something happening in the neighborhood that just brings people in? Is it club night that night? And but you need to start asking questions as opposed to saying, oh, good, Thursday's a big day. So, if you're not really measuring it, you don't know why it's working when it works, and you don't know why it's not working when it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, it's back to the measurement mindset. So it's not that you have to go out and build a database and you've got to go get analytical software. Just simply asking questions. Big days are Thursdays. Okay, so what's going on? It's like, and where do you come from? And why are there so many people here? Do you know? And and then, okay, so how do I get more of that? And then, and then what other days could potentially be big days, right? So many times people automatically go to, well, I got to discount my product, or I got to do a promotion, or I give away something. But you can ride natural tides of where people traffic, and then you can actually get more revenue per product, as opposed to automatically thinking you've got a discount. But if you don't really understand that, you're going to go back to the key lever of everything is drop the price, right? And maybe that's not it, because there's all types of analyses that show that there's a breaking point where if a product costs too little, people will question the value of it, and so therefore, you can discount it, but it's a race to the bottom. And it's a race to the bottom. And so you have to understand not just what your competitors are charging, but what are people willing to pay? And are they willing to pay more for premium service? I mean, I've been in barbershops where I've had to pay $40 for a haircut, right? And I've been in barbershops where I had to pay $15 for a haircut. I didn't mind paying $40 because it was the atmosphere. And it was what they did to make you feel welcome, the great conversation, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, hey, I'm willing to pay that. A lot of people aren't. I had another barber, I'm sorry to go down this path, but he charged a lot per haircut. And I'm like, wow, that's an awful lot. And he's like, but I cut half as many heads as the guy next to me. Okay. And that guy's killing himself, for $15 a cut, and I'm going home to see my kids. Because my clientele is willing to pay it, and that's who I'm going to focus on. I'm not going to focus on everybody. I'm only going to focus on people who are willing to pay.
So I'm glad you went down that path, because there's two things I need you to remember. I mentor about 30 entrepreneurs. The first thing I got to tell them is everybody's not your customer. Yeah. So when you say, oh, maybe the price is too high, what you're saying is either I don't know who my customer is, or I don't want to work hard to keep them. Yeah. Somebody that wants the rolls ain't looking at a Toyota. Nothing wrong with Toyotas, but if you're selling a roll, sell a roll. You can't cut the price. The second thing is, if the first thing you do is cut the price, if that's your answer to every problem, you got a bigger problem as an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. You don't believe in the value of what you're offering, and you're right. They're not going to say, oh, this is more affordable. They're going to say, what's wrong with this? Mm-hmm. If everybody else is in a certain range of price. Can we go to the graphic and the case study that you want to do?
Just walk through it real quick. Yeah, this is just a basic idea of what a marketing funnel looks like. And I wanted to expand on the left with really just what some common terms you might hear, such as discovery, consumption, consideration, and conversion. These are terms we've probably heard us say when we say top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, users falling through. The idea is that when users are at the top of the funnel, these are users who are aware of your brand, impressions, social media followers, et cetera. How you move them down this funnel, how you optimize moving them down this funnel is the key to making sure you're spending less money on things that take up your time when you could be spending more time on things that make you the most money. So this graphic is really just a base representation of that, with also just some keys of different platforms that kind of apply to the top of the level, top of the funnel, mid-level, down to conversion, et cetera. So this is just kind of more of a reference point, so you guys kind of can actually a visual element to kind of know what we're talking about. And this really applies to a lot of online activity, but it can apply to offline as well. If users are becoming more aware of you via a billboard, and you understand that they're calling you from a certain zip code, you can measure how they're moving down that funnel and say, I need more billboards, or I need a bigger billboard. So the idea of this funnel is the basis of a lot of measurement.
The reason why this is important, because this is a concept, and Charles, I do want you to weigh in on this. I want you to stop thinking of data as just a technical online internet digital thing. It's anything you can measure. And this applies to whether you're with General Motors and you're trying to figure out how to get people just from being aware of the new model of the car to actually into the showroom, financing the purchase, or whether you're a local bakery and you're just trying to make sure that you sell enough cakes on a monthly basis to make a profit. It's something that scales up or down. So, and you talked, Charles, about even measuring things like how are you getting your best employees? What is your recruitment process? What is your vending process? That all of that stuff can be measured from awareness down to, okay, sales might be hiring, a successful hire at the bottom. Yep, so talk more about this is not just.
Yep. It's not just for breakfast anymore, as the saying used to go. I mean, it's really a mindset about everything you do, your operations, your throughput, your inputs, people costs, businesses completely underestimate what people costs are.
And the single biggest cost in almost every business is labor.
Absolutely. Yep. And even at companies, giant companies like GM, we spend very little time understanding. We just say, well, I guess that's what the attrition rate is, right? And it's like, but what's the benchmark? And why are people coming and going? And what is the hard cost of having to now re-recruit, rehire, re-onboard, retrain, right? And people just say, well, it's just a cost. But no, it's what are the things you're doing up front to be more selective? And you can't ever unwind a bad hire very easily, right? So you have to be very purposeful in this space. So once again, I mean, these are just kind of basic ways of thinking about. It's really an analytical mindset more so than doing data science or whatever. Although there's, if you grow to a certain size, you'll want to do those sorts of things. And one other thing about the funnel too is the funnels are fickle, and here's why. You remember when email first came out? All right, and it was hot.
I'm willing to admit how old I am.
Yeah, right. It was hot, and you responded to every one. Now, what percentage do you respond to now? Right? Well, maybe 5%, right? It's because people have they just hammer you with email, and it's like, so that's not even useful anymore, except if it's where you have a one-to-one relationship with a customer. So using the right channel for the right audience is critical. But just remember that what was hot is not. And so therefore, you always have to be thinking about and reading up on what's the next new way to reach customers. Yeah. And because if you don't, the world will pass you by. I'll give you one example from GM. All right, so for Chevy, Buick, GMC, Cadillac, we run lots of commercials, right? Okay, so that's great for boomers and Xers, but millennials don't watch TV. Or they certainly don't sit through the commercial. If we're not changing the way we reach that audience, we will be out of business in 20 years because they don't look at those sorts of things and understand, that this is what's, these are great vehicles that have great features and benefits and what have you. So you've got to segment, even today, not just for the future, but you've got to segment your customers and say, now what's the right product set? What's the right pricing? You can charge different prices for different customers. You do know that, right?
For the same thing.
For the same thing, because someone's willing to pay more, right? And so all the way across, segmenting your customers, understanding their motivations, understanding their buying patterns, understanding when they're in the market and when they're not. Those are really critical things that will help you, once again, focus your time and energies on the things that have the greatest payback.
Yeah. And so you really want to avoid the set it and forget it mentality.
Definitely.
There's people who are dependent on tools. They want to say, okay, I got my tools in place. I get my reports. Now I can take my eye off the ball and just do whatever else I want to do. This idea of understanding your customers, and not just by age, and I got black women and black men. In each of those groups, some of those customers are more valuable than others. And if you're not looking and asking and tracking, you won't know. You won't know. And then you'll start trying to sell to everybody, which again, if you start selling to everybody, you're selling to nobody. So we're going to go to Q&A soon, but each of you, give me some final thoughts before we go into Q&A about, I think we have an audience that has bought in. I think we're preaching to the choir at this point. I think the fact that they came, we had such a full house, says they understand this is important. But we really want you guys to take action. The success of this conference is what we learn about what you do after you leave here. We want you to have a good time while you are here, but this is not, I had a good time. I saw Mark Cuban and then I went home. And my business is not going to change, and the way I do my business is not going to change. Or maybe I need to get out of this business and get into another business. So if they didn't remember anything else you said, what do you want them to remember?
I think the customer is not always right. A lot of customers will complain and not buy from you. They'll be the ones who are giving you the constant feedback. I think you should change this on the product. But the customer who literally discovered your product and purchased it, that's where you want to focus. And if I could leave you guys with one thing, is that when it comes to measurement and when it comes to action, a lot of you may be saying, okay, we're up here talking about measurement, up here talking about action. I have no idea how to do that. Even before we go into measurement action, there's a lot of tools out there that you don't have to set and forget. And that number one tool is just information. There's an extreme amount of information out there where you could spend 10 minutes a day learning about one aspect of data measurement. And if you're doing that after an entire week, you're not wasting time that you could be spending on something else. This is going to make you money in the end. So if I leave you with one piece of information, is that information is in abundance. So go out there, look for it, you don't have to make mistakes because other people have already made those mistakes and put them online and say, hey, I effed up here. Here's where you don't have to F up. You know, so if I leave you with one thing, it's look up this information. Try to figure out how you can apply it to your business, because you will find someone out there who's doing the exact same thing that you are doing, and you can see where they, you know, measurement leaves a trail, success leaves a trail, so does failure. You know, go out there and find those failures and learn from them.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah, I would leave you with two things. The first is a pretty old technique, but it's very easy to do. And it allows you to understand who your most valuable customers are and who your least valuable customers are. It's a thing called RFM, recency, frequency, monetary. It's an old thing. Lots of companies don't even use it anymore because they've gotten really sophisticated, but it's very basic. When's the last time your customer bought something from you, right? How often do they buy something from you? And how much do they spend when they do? And if you were to just basically give some basic points, you know, so maybe 3 points for high, medium, low against each one of those things, and then you just put it in a spreadsheet and rank it in descending order, and you'll say, hey, wait a minute, now what are the revenues for my top, and then what does it cost to actually serve them? Now, what are my revenues for the bottom, and what does it cost to serve them? And then you'll see, hey, wait a minute. Even if they spend a lot, if it's only episodic, you're at risk of losing that customer. You want a repeat customer who purchases frequently, right? So recency, frequency, monetary is very simple to do. And if you were to actually plug it into a spreadsheet and rank your customers based upon that measure, you'll find that, hey, wait a minute. It's Pareto rules, right? It's 20% of your customers generate 80% of your revenue. That's for every single business there is, right? And so the question is, but does 20% of your customers generate 80% of your profit? Very different thing. So
say that again, recency, frequency,
monetary.
That's gold right there.
Yeah. So people come in and buy a lot, you know, buy often, you know, and don't spend a lot and cost you a lot. Okay, well then how am I going to differentiate service level so they get a minimum level of service, right? But I'm not going to give them white glove treatment if they're not giving me white glove money, right? And so I think it's really critical to be able to do that. But it's a very simple approach. The second is that there are all kinds of tools that are off the shelf, apps that you can buy where you can plug, you know, you can extract information from your QuickBooks or from spreadsheets or whatever, and then it's point and click. You're not writing code, but all it is just understanding the general flow of your business, understanding the cycles, understanding what things cause those things. I mean, very simple tools that you can buy right off the shelf. They're designed for entrepreneurs, and it's very easy to get your hands on, very easy to use. And I would recommend you actually do that right away.
So we're going to jump into Q&A. I'm going to go over the ground rules again. Q, right? A, right here. 2, and if someone else has their hand up for a question, you cannot ask multiple questions. So don't say, my first question and my second, one question per person because we want everybody to get a shot. 3, obviously we're not going to get to everybody. If we run out of time, if you don't follow me on social media already, I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. anywhere. Any question you ask that you have that couldn't get answered here, DM me or just get to me. If I can't get to these 2 gentlemen to get an answer, I will get an answer for you, and I promise I will answer your question. So don't feel like if you don't bum rush the stage, you're going to leave empty-handed. Your work starts after the session is over, okay? We're good? First question.
Yes, is there a book, a white paper, an academic journal, or maybe one of the apps that you could recommend that all of us should be using right now?
Analytics for Dummies.
Analytics for Dummies. Okay.
Seriously, I mean, it's actually a pretty good book. It'll just help you understand how to frame a problem and then decompose it into the data elements required and then interpret the results.
Thank you.
My question's somewhat on the same line as that one. Can you give us any tips on how to automate the collection of the data, one, and do you know of any good aggregators that can be used to bring it all together, maybe some dashboard or something that you know of that would be a great way of collecting your data and analyzing it in one place?
Yeah. I think make sure you have a CRM system if you don't, just to make sure you're measuring.
Everybody knows what a CRM means? Okay, customer resource management?
Yeah, so I mean, it's whether you're looking at how your social media followers are coming in and looking at how they're jumping from social media to your house and measuring, that. There are plenty of tools out there. I would say I could recommend, I don't recommend a certain one, but at the end of the day, it's really looking at, your base tools you have, whether you have it on your website, looking at your, Instagram analytics, whether it be Facebook analytics, et cetera, and using those to kind of interpret. Because if you get one tool that's going to say we're going to interpret everything for you, you're going to run into a problem. The problem is going to be that one tool is going to prioritize other platforms over the one that you value the most. So when it comes to finding one solution to automate anything, everybody wants to automate their businesses and just sit home and relax. The moment you make that decision, you better be, you should make sure you have a good business going. So automation is one thing, measurement is another. And always make sure you know those two things are different and make sure you can kind of measure without, focusing on too much automation.
And as that measurement comes before automation.
Definitely.
So it's better to know the top 5 things you want to measure and only get the tools that will measure that and automate that, than get something that will measure everything. Because if nothing's prioritized, it's information without knowledge.
Definitely.
And you can't act on that. So start simple and scale up. Don't start big and scale down. Next question.
What free or low-cost tools would you recommend for small business owners? I know that you ended on that, and I asked my sister sitting next to me if you had named some of those tools that were accessible. So if you could maybe name a few of those that you would recommend, particularly for small business owners.
Yeah, so Salesforce.com has a simple automation, and it's got reporting associated with it. You can also, Google Analytics is dirt cheap. There's also a product called SaaS, which is, they've now gone into the small and medium business space. They used to be only enterprise, but very point and click, in terms of capability. You can import information from a spreadsheet or from a variety of other data sources, and then you can use that to analyze. Microsoft has a product called Power BI, which is affordable. Not the enterprise version, obviously, but they make smaller versions of it, recognizing that that all businesses should be measuring their business. So there's quite a number of products. Oracle has a couple of products as well. They're going to be a little more expensive. But I would start, once again, people want to kind of automatically go to the tools. A simple spreadsheet with some very basic analyses in Microsoft Excel can be very powerful, very powerful. And then you'll outgrow that, but in terms of getting your start, tracking inventory, or looking at days sales outstanding, or looking at your marketing funnel, whatever it might be, spreadsheets work just fine. I mean, if you're trying to get your start, spreadsheets work just fine, and there are a lot of add-ins in Microsoft Excel that are geared towards point and click ability to get answers to questions rather easy. So you don't have to write a lot of macros or anything like that.
Let me say, it's not you will outgrow that, you must outgrow that. Some people start cheap and easy, and they just stay there. When to get better results, you need to get better tools. It's the same thing. If it's less expensive, there's a reason. So I want you to have the mindset, you start where you are, but then you need to learn about other tools that may not be in your budget now, but you want to graduate to, because it's not just how inexpensive it is, it's how much money can you make with the data that you're going to get back. So don't just think about it's cheap. Think about how much money you can leverage, because you'll spend more if you can make more.
Yeah, and I would encourage you not to go a custom route. Every business thinks that their business is so unique that that you can't use something off the shelf. But there's all kinds of software, regardless if you're in real estate or if you're in restaurants. Or there's all kinds of automated software. I would go with things that are off the shelf. The reason why is it's a mistake that even enormous companies make. The more you customize, the more you rely upon the person who sold it to you. And so therefore, they're having to come back in and do the software updates and do the patching to make sure people aren't stealing your data and things like that. But when it's off the shelf and it's designed for simplicity, you don't have to go through that custom thing, because that's the heavy labor cost that they come in and charge you $150 an hour, whatever it is, to fix something. So I would stay away from fully customized solutions. If a reseller comes in, some of these businesses in here might be to help you install software, which is great. I would try to go with something that's a known off-the-shelf product, and maybe they actually tune it to your business, but not necessarily customize it so that you're having to spend a lot every time you need to upgrade.
Yeah, I think I have one more thing. How many of you guys are utilizing something like Google Analytics on at least monthly basis? Okay, if your business is online, you have a website, that needs to be on there. And it's one of the free tools up until a certain point, but at the end of the day, they offer a wide range of tools that can help you get to the point where you're automated. And they have a tool called Data Studio, and it can also go into Google Sheets, which is, you pull it into Excel and kind of getting your data that way. And this is all just putting one little piece of code on your site, or actually, depending on what your hosting is, it might be 3 or 4 clicks and you have analytics on your site. So that's one tool that you could use to at least start the measurement process.
Next question.
Yes, when doing your segmentation model and looking at your A customers, your B customers, and your C customers, when you're looking at your A customers and you're saying, this is what I want to replicate year over year, what are some of those key metrics that you recommend that we continue to study? Right now I'm looking at margin, net profit, COGS, et cetera, but what are those key drivers that we should really be focusing on when we're looking to replicate that tier A customer?
Yeah, I mean, when you get down to segmentation, it puts a smile on my face, because at the end of the day, segmentation is, like you said, that's the key to really getting down into understanding your customer and understanding and knowing, realizing that every last customer is different. And when you start to build those segmentation models, it's really hard to say from a generic perspective, because as soon as you have a segment of your customers, it totally changes everything that you're doing. So it's going to be very difficult for me to say, okay, we'll focus on this and do that, because I'm going to be speaking generically, and that's not a good thing for me to do. But really understand the success and moving the needle where you want it to go for that segment. So don't just, if once you start to segment, don't measure your business from, the needle's moving here with everyone. No, the needle moving here with this particular segment. And then that sub-segment of people, the needle's moving there as well. So when you're measuring those things, I would just say, once you start to segment, don't think, okay, we good, we segmenting now. No, now you got to measure the segmentation. So, I think that's the best way to go about it.
Yeah, and I would add, if you have more than one product and your customer only buys one product from you, then they're not a good customer. And now that doesn't mean that they can't be a good customer, right? But what you really want to do is understand how engaged they are with you. So, I mean, how many of you have Apple products in your house? How many of you have at least 4 Apple products in your house? Right? You see what I'm saying? I mean, Apple throws out whatever and people buy it, right? Because they're enamored with the product. And even if it's not as good, one, Apple's got their hooks into you, right? And then 2, it's like, this is a brand I trust. And so I think, there are certain principles around engagement, around cross-sell, around upsell, around utilization. That's another thing people don't do. They'll sell somebody something, and if the person doesn't use it, they're not going to buy it again. So you want to understand, okay, they bought the product, but are they using my product? And if they are using my product, then how do I get them to use it more, and then use the next product, and then the next, and then the next. So those are kind of key principles that I would say, because ultimately you don't need a lot of customers, you just need the right customers.
Yep. Next question.
Mr. Thomas, you talked about how people are having difficulty adjusting to millennials' viewing patterns and things like that, traditional media. Either of you got a feel for how the OTT and things like that are coming into play, and are companies respecting and really taking that seriously as those viewing attitudes shift?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with a few companies, and making the adjustment to a lot of OTT products has really kind of been a challenge for very traditional media companies. They say, okay, well, we're TV focused, and how do we move? What are we doing on Xbox? Like that really makes no sense to me. At the end of the day, making that transition is a measurement decision. It's understanding that, hey, you have an audience you want to reach on TV. They're not watching TV. This content's relevant to them. How are you going to engage them even on the OTT products? How are you deciding which product you should be actually putting your content on? So that's when you move back into segmentation. You have millennials who use all these different products. Some of them are on YouTube, some of them on Xbox, some on PlayStation, some on their mobile phones, on Amazon, etc. You find those sub-segments of users and really make sure you say, okay, well, this content is on traditional media. How are we going to segment and get it to distribution platforms that are relevant to that millennial sub-segment? So I think, you're moving into that direction. You got to really make sure, I've done it so many times just to make sure that those users are where you want them to be.
Yeah, as a traditional media company, we struggled with that for like 10 years, because when traditional media owned the club back in the day, Like you wanted to go party, you came to my club. And then now they started throwing their own parties, and we're like, we can't get them to come to the club. You know, so it's, with millennials, it's don't try to drag them to your club TV that they don't want to watch. You got to go to their club, and that club might be a speakeasy kind of concept. You got to be willing to go where your customer is, not just millennials, but wherever your customer is, that's where you need to go. It's not, oh, I built it, why don't they come here?
Yeah, and it's not just the channels, the content as well, and the relevancy of the message and the timing of the message. So we were talking with the head of North America for Google last week, and he said, you know, we found out the darndest thing about YouTube. You only need a 6 or 7 second commercial, and that's it. And when you have that, then people buy. When you go longer, people tune you out, right? So it's not only the channel, but it's the content, and it's the duration, and all of those other things. So, and how do they do that? They measure everything.
I'm going to ask my coordinator. I can finish these 4? Okay, so gentlemen, you're the last question. So don't
Hi.
waste his time.
Hi, as a new business owner, I wanted to know, I know you guys have stressed measuring, but how long do you measure something? Because I feel like right now my partners and I are throwing things out there, kind of hoping for the best. So how long should we stay on something and then try to move on to the next, or not doing it too soon?
As far as stopping measurement, never stop measurement as long as you're in business, like never stop. I think as far as measuring and knowing when it's not moving the needle in the direction you want it to go into, you're not going to stop measuring at that point, because once you realize this is not working, you're actually going to start to measure more. You know, once you say, okay, this isn't moving the needle at all, we've measured this, you're going to start to measure even more than what you were doing before. So I think at that point, it's less about, you know, deciding we're going to stop measuring that because that's not working. It's not working for a reason. And you need to understand that before you move on to the next thing or decide we want to stop, you know, at all. So.
Yeah, and that's where business judgment comes in as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you understand the natural sales cycle of your product or service, right? And so, you know, you have to kind of map out your measurement plan against that. If you know that you run a promotion and then people will tend to buy, you know, most of your shoppers come in the first week, and it drops off significantly the second week, it drops off significantly, and that's just the way that it is. You know, I'm not saying that you should stop measuring, I'm just saying that, you know, you should use your natural sales cycles to say, okay, so when do we put the next promotion in the market? And that's a way that you can do it. So that's not really gonna be data driven, that's just gonna be the natural flow of your business.
Next question.
Charles, your title, Chief Data and Analytics Officer, is a fairly new type of title.
Yes.
And I would argue that old school CEOs like Jack Welch would probably say that he always measured data.
Sure.
And so I'm just curious as what has changed in the business environment that now places so much focus on data and analytics.
Yeah, it's the explosion of the sheer volumes of data. I've been fortunate enough to participate in the major explosions in data. The first is .com, right? So you have .com generating a lot of data. The second is mobile, right? The third is Internet of Things, right? Where the cost of putting a chip on whatever it is so cheap now that you might as well put one on there and measure things. In Australia, they're putting chips on the backs of bees so that they understand the migration patterns, because pollination will drive crops, right? And so people measure everything, but imagine the sheer volumes of data. So we collect billions of rows of data on our connected vehicles every single day. And so trying to make sense of that, and how do you actually use that to help the customer experience? How do you use that to diagnose problems with vehicles? These are new problems because of the sheer volumes of data that were never here before.
Thank you.
And I think I could add to that too, just real quick. At the end of the day, I have my entire business is dealing with very high level companies and brands that have too much data and they can't read it. And they basically say, okay, well, our problematic buying company sent us this report, our PR sent us this report, social media sent us this report, on-site sent us this report. What does it all mean? At the end of the day, it has to be put together in a way that can be understood to determine what's next. So I think that's where that sheer volume of data comes in, and I can't even imagine what it's like with GM, but that's where,
And if I could have a shameless plug on that topic, McKinsey and Company issued a report that basically said there's going to be a shortage of about 200,000 Americans who understand how to do data analysis, because now everything creates data. Your toasters create data, your coffee makers create data. It is a shame that our kids are dissuaded from math and science in high school because they can't participate in this booming economy. And so, shameless plug, if any of you have kids in college or thinking about college or going to college, if you major in data sciences, you're almost guaranteed a job, and it's going to pay $100 grand right out of school.
Excellent. Okay, let's get these last two questions
Thank you for your time. My question is on the qualitative side. We do a lot of qualitative. Oh, we do a lot of qualitative. That's better?
Yes.
Where was I going? On the qualitative side. Oh, there. So the tools that you would recommend on the qualitative versus the quantitative, would they be similar? We do a lot of survey, experience rating, data capture. And we know and understand that what you put in the beginning is what you're going to get out. And so for us to be able to segment and get the richest amount of data, would you recommend using the same tools or something different?
Yeah, they're very similar tools. You know, SPSS is a tool that is really good for those kind of data. And that's relatively cheap off the shelf. And just to understand that qualitative data is very important. We always think about the numbers, but you know, the numbers are the what, the qualitative is why. And you want to understand why and how, so that you can do more of the good stuff and less of the bad stuff. So the two have to work together. But the tools are pretty similar.
Sir, last question.
Okay.
Good.
A bit of background. So I'm a mass comm major who graduated, but so you know my industry has had a lot of conversion. What we're focusing on now is niching towards different segments. One of the tools we use is Black Twitter. My question for you is when y'all are looking for different minorities to research and find out their habits, what do you go to, just like you gave examples about Oracle and stuff, are there databases and places that you look to find the spending habits of African American, Latinos, and things of that nature?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, especially with Black Twitter, the one thing I've tried to measure with a few of my clients is the emotional output of what's getting them excited. So if I say, hey, I'm putting some motivational quotes up, is that going to get Black Twitter excited? Probably not. But if I'm putting something out about whether it be a celebrity, this, that, and the other, so Black Twitter is usually only relevant when it comes to certain topics. That's when you really hear about it. So when you start to measure that and you understand that the positive or negative sentiment really gets people activated, then you start to say, okay, well, what kind of conversation are we going to participate in? And if you're going niche and you're trying to advertise to that market from an African American perspective, understand that depending on what gets people excited is great to know, but what gets them to convert is a whole other data segment. So
well, yeah, and then one thing about those sorts of things is that they're biased. When I say biased, I don't mean like racially biased. They're biased because someone, the people there have something in common. They're interested in the same things. If you're interested in saying, how do I get in touch, if I want to get in touch with more Black folks in general, not just those who are on Black Twitter or whatever, there are research companies that own what's called panels. In those panels, they capture people who are willing to participate in surveys. They do it online, and then you can go and select specific demographics that you might want to survey if you want to ask them particular questions. And so, you can focus on, Black folks in Atlanta versus those in Charlotte, and you can get that specific on in terms of demographics that you might want to talk to.
Black, female, age is the beginning of who your customers are. If you stop there, you're not going to know enough, all right? With that, please give our educators a round of applause. You guys have been a great and attentive audience, and let's move on to the